Let me introduce the speakers. We've got two of our officers up here. Bill Virtue is our immediate past president, and has been real involved with education in in our academy and helping us with this fundamentals course. He was president last year, so this past a year ago. So this past year, he's been our immediate past president, and he'll be going back onto the board of directors. And then and Bill's from North Carolina, and Joe Palmer is our treasurer. He's from South Carolina, and he's been our treasurer now for, I think it's 4 years, something like that, keeping the money straight. And thankfully, because of this meeting, we're anticipating a good profit where our membership is up. For those of you who've not decided to become a member yet, hopefully this meeting will affirm the benefit of that. Again, like I said, we need your help, not only from a participation standpoint, but financially. We've got a lot of projects we're trying to fund. And so Joe helps keep us straight with the money and make sure we're in the black on all of our efforts. So I think Bill's going to be going first, so I'll turn it over to him. And again, welcome to Texas.
Thank you, Jack. Mike. Am I on? You guys hear me? Okay. I guess that's Dave. Excuse me? Yeah, it's on. I can speak loudly. Hello? Is it on? Okay, now it's working. Okay. I can't tell up here. Yeah, welcome. Jack, thank you for the introduction. That was well done. Actually, I did spend some time as a child in Texas. I lived in McGowan. And Brownsville is 5 or 6 year olds, so distant memories of horned toads and desert, but it was fun. Originally from New Jersey, but now for the last 35 years in North Carolina. This is our 30th anniversary, as Jack said, which means we've had 60 meetings like this. We have 2 a year, one in September and one in March. They're always 3-day meetings. We have the fundamentals, and then we have 2 days of symposiums, which are excellent. And we're really glad you're here. We really are. This is a great show and a great turnout, so please make yourself happy and enjoy yourself. If you haven't signed up for the next 2 days, Friday and Saturday, please do. We have a giant gala Saturday night to celebrate our 30th anniversary. And, of course, lunches are included, but great speakers. We've got 2 days of Friday and Saturday. This course is a little different, and it's kind of relaxed, and you can ask questions whenever you want to. So please, you have, except for that back row back there, there are no questions allowed from the, yeah, that's you, Phil, and the 2 guys next to you. They're here to harass me. We've got charter members back there, so which have been with us for 30 years. I've been in the academy since 97, I think. So how many every years that is? 16 or 17 or something along that range. So during the Friday and Saturday meeting, questions are asked at 4 o'clock, which at the speakers meeting. So all the speakers come back in, they line them up, and then you get to ask questions, at that time tomorrow and Saturday. However, today, if you got a question, please ask. Joe and I have been doing this for several years now. We really, really enjoy it. It's an opportunity for us to give back to our dental community. The reason we're here, we're on our own dime. We're not getting paid for this, and you'll see why as the morning progresses. But, we do this because we love it, and we're wanting to give back to our profession. The Academy's whole thing is to get mercury and fluoride out of dentistry, and that's our goal. And now you might think that's kind of wacky. Some of us, probably are here because you think we're crazy, and some of us are. But our goal is to get mercury and fluoride out of dentistry. It's not necessary, it's not useful, and it's actually very harmful, which you'll learn more about as we go through. We want to change your life. That's our goal. We would like to get you to become members. I'll be stating right up front, my goal this whole weekend is to get you to become an Academy member, and hopefully certified, accredited, fellowed, mastered, whatever, so you can move on. It changes your life in so many ways. Not only does it change your dentistry, it changes your health. It changes the health of your staff, and it's going to change the health of your patients and your family. So consider that. We've got a great profession. Dentistry is an absolutely great way to make a living. I mean, I love dentistry. I get frustrated, I get tired of it. I've been doing it 35 years. Sometimes I dream about retirement, but since I have very few hobbies, I'll probably do this for a long, long time. But it enables you to branch out. Phil back there, sitting on the back row, he's got a course. You can become a naturopath, and you can be a certified biological dentist, and there's all kinds of avenues that the Academy presents to encourage and increase your knowledge of not just dentistry, but health and life and physiology. You won't see slides of teeth. Well, we may have one or two only to demonstrate galvanism, but we're not here as an academy to teach you how to do a better margin or take a better impression or occlusion. You're not going to get that. That's not what we're about. You all know that stuff. We all came from great dental schools, and I'll tell you, we're not about making you wrong if you're doing amalgam filling still or not doing it the way we do it. It's about changing and learning what we learn. So, every school we went to is good, and I've never met a dentist who tried to do it the wrong way or did something because they just were trying to hurt or harm somebody. So what we're going to talk about the next 3 days is not about punishing or saying you're wrong. It's just an opportunity to change. A long time ago, wasn't too long, we couldn't eat eggs. They were bad for us. And then realized, hey, cholesterol is not so bad thing. We got to have it. So the whole point being is that we're just here to present our words, what we think is true. The Academy's got a database that backs up everything we're going to talk about. So, it's science, and I know we can argue about this is junk, that's junk. Just open your eyes and take a look at what we're going to say, okay? Because it's good stuff, and it's true. And it's a paradigm shift. When you go back to your office, if you're not practicing biological dentistry, and you hear what we're going to say, you're going, geez, this isn't just about changing a diamond for a preparation or impression material, as I said. This is a whole lifestyle shift or a dental practice shift. And I tell people, as I did, my first meeting was at Duke University, or Durham it was, at the Duke's there, but back in, I think it was 97. And I really got the feeling I was dealing with kooks and crazy people, because these dentists were talking about taking metal out of the mouth and not using mercury and not using fluoride. I was like, my God, are you kidding? You don't use fluoride? How could you practice? That's sacrilege. But after I listened for a while, I thought, there's some truth to this. And they also dressed a little funny back there. Some had Birkenstocks and ponytails. So it was a little different group. I'm used to, I'm a Pankey alumni, and, I take all that stuff. I'm a junkie on education. So it's quite a different group. Today we do wear ties and coats and suits and stuff, so we do look a little different. But it was pretty crazy back then. But we've come a long way. How many people are members in here? Okay, we got a bunch. Is this your first time fundamentals then? Okay. To become accredited, you have to take the fundamentals course, and I think take 2 weekend courses with us, and then there's an open book test. So this is part of that process. Have we a hygienist? Okay. Assistants? Okay. How many people think we're crazy, or you've been told we're crazy? Phil? Yeah. Okay. Well, you're probably right. I'm not here to argue with you. I'm just here to present our side of the story, and perhaps by the end of the weekend, you'll have a different opinion of who we are and what we have to say. And it's not important who we are. What's important is what we have to say. All right. Now, I'm going to apologize right off the bat for messing up the slideshow here, because I'm kind of not the best guy with clickers, but I've only got 2 buttons to worry about. So we'll go ahead and get started. And again, if there's any questions, just go ahead and ask out loud. I'm not getting this to advance, Dave. And by the way, Dave and Jim, thank you. These are the guys that set up all this audio-visual stuff. And I'll tell you, they work their butts off. There's going to be many rooms that they're doing this in, and they do great, and thank you. Okay. Let me try I'm not getting it to advance. And I probably won't keep this sport coat on long either. I'm kind of hot-natured. Jim, I can't get the computer to go either. Any questions? Ask away. Oh, by the way, I'm from North Carolina. Indiana graduate. Any Indiana graduates here? All right. 2. Very good. 2, is that all? All right. I came out of prison in 79. And moved to North Carolina immediately. Stuart back there in the back of the row, he's our incoming president Saturday. He thinks this is God's country, but I don't think he's been to North Carolina, so. Yet. Well, I haven't been outside the hotel, so I don't know. I got here last night, went in the hotel, it was dark, so. Sorry about this, but like I said, if I touch it, it won't work. My granddaughter, we got a smart TV at home, and I'm not allowed to work that anymore because I pushed the wrong buttons. She says, "Stop watching the family TV." Like, okay. All right, well, what do I do up here? I can't get this to advance either. Go. Nah, not doing it. Yeah. I think we've gone out to get help. Anybody got a joke or anything? Excuse me? Escape? Who was that? The Indiana graduate? Yeah, see? See? And why did you move out of Indiana? Or maybe you didn't? I did not move out of Indiana. Okay. You in Indianapolis? No. All right. Well, I was a Carmel grad. Lived up there for 12 years or so. All right. Here we go. Good deal. Yeah, this is just a little introduction. We're going to be talking about Mercury 101 and 102, a little bit of chemistry, not very deep involved, and some of us who remember chemistry, probably many of us do, we won't get too into the stuff. Just a little overview of what we're going to do. First, I'll be talking about Mercury 101 and 102. Then Joe will come in and introduce some safe management practices for dentistry, how to remove mercury, and some of the latest things that we're now kicking around as the Academy. What it means to be a member of the Iaomt, Mercury-Free era. And then later this afternoon, David Kennedy will come in and speak about fluoride, which is a really great speaker, and a lot of really good information. So you'll enjoy this afternoon. And a communication biological dental one, and then later on this morning, or if we don't get done in time because of the delay, I'll come in right after lunch and finish up. And just kind of a little communication and marketing and stuff you need to do and things you don't need to do when you're talking about mercury or fluoride dentistry. The information you hear at our meeting is derived from science, delivered by clinicians, research scientists, and health professionals that are committed to the improving and making healthcare safer for patients and the environment. You know, the next 2 days, you're going to hear speakers, PhDs, and researchers from around the world who come in with no particular bent on being right or wrong. This is the research out there. And as I said earlier, once you realize what's being presented and the information behind it and the research, it's going to be hard for you to realize that mercury is not as toxic as we're going to tell you it is. It's extremely toxic. The only material more toxic that's not radioactive is plutonium. So, you know, this stuff is crazy that we're putting in people's mouths, and it's even more dangerous as we try to remove it. So we'll go into more of that in a bit. And as Carl Sagan said, the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. So, you know, it's like, you get to tune me up?
Try to get something
okay.
It doesn't advance, eh?
Yeah, we got it.
Oh, it does work.
Yeah, I discovered if I hit the escape button, it works fine.
Okay. You're a computer genius.
See, and you thought I could only handle 2 buttons. See, he knows. Yeah, too many people know me here. You know, it's funny, when Joe and I, when I was asked to do this presentation, about 4 years ago or something, I've forgotten exactly how long, Joe wasn't included in that. And we were up in Chicago at a meeting to do some management training for the Academy and to advance our to organize ourselves a little better, I guess you'd say, for the future. And he kept telling me, he said, "Bill, you can't do that." I said, "What are you talking about?" You know, I can do that. He said, "You don't even own a computer, man. How are you going to do a slideshow and put all this together?" Oh, that's no problem. I'll figure it out. So after that weekend, he convinced me that I better sign up with Joe. And I got to give Joe thanks for many of these slides. Rich Channon, somewhere maybe in the back, he's also responsible for a lot of this information. So this is stuff that's just been gleaned. Hey, Nestor, one of our past presidents just walked in. This information has been collected over many years, and I just have an absolute privilege to present it. And Wayne Dyer says, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, which is very, very interesting. And this weekend is particularly prudent because, because what we're going to present, if you look at it open-mindedly, you're going to find out that you can't look at it. There's Rich. You can't look at it differently. It's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that ain't so, which is I think, a pretty profound statement. And, as I said earlier, an attitude of we are right and you are wrong stops communication. That's not what we're trying to do. That's not what we're about. As I said, my school in Indiana, I graduated out in 79. There was no conversation at all about toxicity of mercury. We were taught that you had to keep your scrap in a little bottle of oil with a lid on it. And that was about all we got from, mercury toxicity. There was no question about breathing it, the biological implications with enzymes and everything else, because I don't think we knew that stuff. We just knew that mercury was toxic, but once it was in that filling, it was locked in place and it's not coming out, which everybody knows that's not true. The ADA knows that's not true, and they admit it. So we're not here to make anybody wrong. We're just presenting our opinion, and opinion's quite right, I think. We feel the key to changing the current mercury policy is communicating the health and environmental dangers of mercury to the public. As I'll go into a little bit later, we all think about the health aspect of mercury, but we don't really look at the environmental impact of this. Now, we know that, mercury batteries aren't good, and mercury's in tuna and all this kind of stuff, and some of our waterways are polluted with mercury, but we're not looking at where it comes from. But if it's in your mouth, it's in the environment, and it'll go back into the environment. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But so there's two aspects, the health and the environment. But the environment ultimately is our health. So it's all one, really.
Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Is mercury toxic?
Elemental mercury is toxic.
Silver amalgam fillings, does it contain mercury?
It does.
Almost up to 50%?
Yes.
Mercury is a toxic substance.
A lot of us have dental amalgams that contain mercury. Anywhere from 4 to 19 micrograms of mercury per day can leach out of your amalgams into your body.
A single filling delivers micrograms of mercury, which in mercury terms is a lot.
Mercury is vaporizing from the amalgams, and you have 80% absorption through the lungs. This is a fairly dangerous scenario.
Dentists go to dental school, they're taught that mixed dental amalgam is completely inert.
They taught us nothing about protecting the staff from the dangers of mercury vapor.
The amount of mercury vapor that's released from amalgam restorations is so minute.
And so when a dentist goes in to grind out an amalgam filling, he is creating tremendous quantities of mercury particulate.
Their dental drill runs at about 400,000 RPM, and it sends a shower of micron-sized and submicron-sized particles everywhere. It's tens of thousands of parts per million.
I've never seen levels of mercury this high. That's pretty much unheard of in any type of work environment.
When a woman is pregnant, we hope that she's never exposed to mercury vapor because we know that it can pass the placenta and cause neurological problems in the unborn baby.
Everyone working around hazardous chemicals and other toxic substances has a right to know of possible dangers and how to protect themselves.
When patients see us dressed like this, there's no way they could believe mercury is safe in their house.
If you're exposed to mercury, we start seeing much more serious health effects. These health effects would be chronic
chronic fatigue, double vision,
Couldn't sleep. Depression.
panic attacks, memory loss, a lowered immune system, loss of vision, chronic headaches.
It is both an immediate problem in some individuals and a very long-term problem in others.
I started having neurological symptoms.
I didn't feel like a human being.
In the deepest part of myself, I thought I was dying.
People think you're crazy, and you're not crazy. You have mercury poisoning.
They'll evacuate a public building for a broken thermometer, but each one of your amalgam fillings has about the same amount of mercury.
2 schools will be closed tomorrow after a custodian finds a small amount of mercury on the floor of a room at Hickman Mills High School.
Now, how much mercury are we talking about? Not very much. About the amount the size of the eraser on this pencil, but school officials explained to us it would only take the amount of mercury about the size of the sharpened end of this pencil to contaminate the entire building.
A toxin that can do the effect, you have it placed within inches of your brain.
They've never done any safety studies on this product.
Why is it that the ADA will not tell the public that mercury amalgam is harmful?
Frankly, the American Dental Association welcomes new looks at all of the dental restorative materials.
The American people are being overtly lied to by the American Dental Association and the dental branch of the Food and Drug Administration.
Wow. That was done by Randall Moore, who's running around here with a camera. Randall's done a lot of filming for us. In fact, this evening, we've got a 90-minute documentary that he's put together over the last 3 years, I'm going to suggest, that we funded or helped fund a great deal of, that goes into a lot of detail. So if you're interested in that, it's going to be right after the board meeting in this room. And are we going to have refreshments start? Is there going to be? Okay. Somebody mentioned on we have monthly meetings of the executive council, and somebody mentioned pizza and beer, so I'm going to be here. What, Joe? You authorized. The treasurer says yes. That's good. Yeah. Okay, so a little bit about my story, which is not particularly interesting, but probably not too dissimilar from a lot of our members here and our new folks that are here. I got on this journey, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago, because I had an aunt who lived up in New Jersey. We're originally from Camden, New Jersey, right outside of Camden, Woodbury, New Jersey. So my whole family was congregated in that area. And my aunt came down to visit my mom, who's since passed on, and my sister and me, and she was same with my sister. But at any rate, she had Lou Gehrig's disease, which was, a pretty serious thing. And as my Aunt Vi came down a couple times with this disease, because it doesn't last forever. You are going to pass on. But at any rate, spending some time with my Aunt Vi, I noticed that when she laughed, which she did constantly, her mouth is full of mercury fillings. At the time, I called them amalgam fillings, but you could see when she smiled, laughed, all of her back teeth were black. And as the disease progressed, my mother said to me, Billy, we always thought my grandmother, my mother's mother, who died before I was born, we thought she died of MS. But my mom said, no, the symptoms are exactly the same as what my mother went through, which was Lou Gehrig's. Back then, diagnosing wasn't really very good. So since then, 3 of my Aunt Vi's children have died of Lou Gehrig's disease. So, a kind of familial tendency there. And I was thinking on the way in a plane yesterday, I've also got an uncle who wasn't by blood, but one of my grandmother's sister's husband also died of Lou Gehrig's. I didn't know him, but my dad told me that years and years ago. So, at any rate, the point was, I'm in a mercury-rich environment. I'm taking these things out and putting them in back then. And I'm either going to have to change jobs or I'm going to have to do something about it. And, changing jobs, leaving dentistry for what? Being a greeter at Walmart or something? No. So, this, I'm not going to do it. So anyway, I decided to change, and that's, been on the journey ever since. And I got into Iaomt, as I was telling you, the weirdos I met in Durham so many years ago turned out to be some of my best friends. So I'm really happy I made the switch. In my evolution, I've been, as I'll talk about a little later today, you don't have to do everything at once. What we suggest, or I suggest anyway, is progress into this change. we've got to show you, Joe will show you more later, but all the equipment that we suggest to do, which isn't a whole lot when you think about a dental office, but if you had to buy it all at one time, maybe it is. But you just need to make incremental changes. What I did is we weren't as advanced and sophisticated as we are now years ago, so you didn't have to do as many things. So you start out with a vinyl dam, not a rubber dam, vinyl, because mercury goes right through rubber. And then when you get the suction tips, you get the suction equipment, and I just gradually progress. Now, you don't have to do it that way. You can go out and just get it all, which is probably the best thing to do, jump off and get wet in a hurry. But there's all kinds of ways of doing it, and we'll talk. Just please ask any questions anytime this weekend, and any member will be happy to talk with you about this. So go at your own pace, but hurry up. What to expect? History of amalgam, we're going to go through that. Mercury 101 and 102, as I said. Mercury-Safe hygiene, which Joe will go over later this morning. Strategies for a biological dentist. And legal considerations. I've been down to Raleigh several times with the board, not for malpractice. Well, they consider it malpractice for telling people they've got mercury fillings in their mouth. I had to take off web pages because these are the symptoms of mercury poisoning. They wanted me to stop calling them mercury fillings and call them amalgams. Absolutely refused. There's no way I'm doing that. Freedom of speech. You can't make me say that. They finally came back and said, well, how about calling them amalgam silver mercury fillings? Nope, they're going to be mercury fillings, and I'll tell you why later. They also made me take, on every page of my website, do general dentistry. And I'll tell you why this happened. Is because if you're a biological dentist, you don't slow down. You are busy. People want this. They come in droves. They come in through the internet. And I think I had some jealous colleagues that weren't as busy, perhaps, and didn't like my marketing. Now I'm on TV, I'm on radio, I do print. I'm a pretty aggressive marketer, and I like doing that. It's just my style. But the people didn't like that, my colleagues. So somebody sent in a printed advertisement of mine that didn't have general dentistry on it. Everything you're supposed to have I'm a general dentist somewhere in the page. Well, you get the marketing after a while, and you kind of get caught up with it. And also the other thing I said, something like the greatest care with the gentlest of hands. And you can't use superlatives in North Carolina. You can't say greatest, gentlest, or anything like that. Gentle or great, but you can't put the EST on the end. So, $10,000 later with legal fees, or maybe more than that now, we've, reached an agreement, and I had put general dentistry on every page of my website. And I still say mercury fillings, so they've left me alone for several years now. But, you got to be careful. Every state's different, and we'll talk about that a little bit in more detail. And we have a mentor program, which I'm part of, but we have people that are very willing to help you, answer any questions. You do telephone conferences with them. So if you have questions, you can call your mentor and get straightened out on what to buy, how to do this, how to do that. So, you don't have to do this alone. We're here to help you, and that's what the Academy is about, is support. What is a biological dentist? A dentist that utilizes the latest technology and techniques to protect his patients, team, and the doctor from hazardous dental materials. You think about that. I'm there all day long. The patient's there maybe 1, 2, 3 hours, and then they're gone. But we're there, staff, 8 hours a day, how many days a week you work. So we're the ones really absorbing the mercury exposures, and that's the thing you got to be careful about. So, you can't just think about the patient in this thing, although they're important, they're coming and paying the bill. But I'm thinking about my assistants and my hygienist. I mean, the hygienists are a little bit removed from this, but still, when we sit down and start grinding out a quadrant of amalgams, mercury fillings, we're exposed even with all the protocol we're doing. And Joe will talk about that this afternoon, how we protect ourselves, but there's still mercury exposure. So part of being a biological dentist would mean you got to protect your staff and yourself with different nutraceuticals, you might say, that help get the mercury out of your body. And go through chelation. I mean, I'm always going through chelation with my alternative physician to get the lead and the mercury and stuff that I constantly absorb out, along with taking daily supplements to help. But guys, we're in a really mercury positive environment. I mean, nobody else in any industry works without any protection. And the EPA, OSHA, none of them care about what we're doing. I mean, none of them regulate us. And if they came into your office and measured the mercury exposure I mean, you wouldn't be able to work the next day. We're way above chloralkali plants. We're above fluorescent light bulb factories, mercury switch factories. All those guys are regulated. They're safer than we are, which is a crazy thing. So I would love for OSHA to come in and start, knocking on doors and saying, hey, well, look at this. I have an OSHA inspector come in every year, a lady that teaches how to, labels all the things and does all that crazy stuff. Pay her $600 for half a day doing that stuff. It's like, God almighty. But anyway, maybe more than that now. And I asked her, I said, when are you guys going to start talking about mercury vapor? Well, it's not really in my book. I said, well, here's a handful of slides. Look at these and see what you think. This is what the OSHA and the EPA is saying. Never heard a word back from her. I mean, they're not interested in doing this. Number one, I don't think any of their clients are interested in hearing it. So they get paid to do this stuff. They'd rather, label bottles of alcohol and, developing solutions, whatever the heck they do. A dentist that realizes that materials that are used in dentistry affect biological systems. Now, if you stick something in your body, whether it's an aspirin or a suppository, it's going to affect something in your body. So everything we put in, whether it be a composite or a night guard or whatever the heck it is going to affect some systems. So you'd be aware of that. It's not perfect. I mean, you got to use acrylic. I use a lot of night guards and bite splints, and they got bis-GMA in them and stuff. So yeah, it's not a perfect world, but you got to be a dentist too. You got to do the right thing dental-wise. And there's a whole can of worms there. I'm not going to get into root canals and everything, but I always try to be a dentist first and a biologist second, so that I can do the right thing as a dentist would do, but also with the idea that I want to make this patient healthy and chew. So there's a balance. A dentist that realizes poor oral health has systemic health connections. We know that perio and heart disease and aneurysms and all that, pneumonia, low birth babies, all connected. So if you have gum disease, you're going to have high tendency to have diabetes. If you have a lot of mercury fillings in your mouth, moms, your babies are going to have mercury in their body. It passes right through to the fetus. So we got to be conscious of that. All right, a little history here. Mercury-containing silver paste, the Chinese started doing this in the 7th century, dissolved copper, tin, and silver shavings into mercury. Now this was I think 7th century they were doing this. So this material is kind of dated, you might say. They didn't know what to do with it particularly, but they discovered that you can make a paste that hardened. And Augustus Travaux created the first amalgam filling by combining elemental mercury shavings from silver coins in 1816. Now what he did, and this is the reason, you ever thought about quarters and silver dollars or half dollars? They got the ridges or edges around all the little, the roughened. Well, they did that so that, if you shave that off of there, you could tell somebody's shaving the silver off of that coin. So if it doesn't have any of those little ridges on it, somebody's been shaving it down. So that's how they were doing this. They were taking this off silver coins and mixing it. And in 1816, which is 200 years ago, is that right? Yeah, the first amalgam filling. So, I don't know about you, but physicians probably don't use a whole lot of stuff they used 200 years ago. I don't think they do. Leeches aren't, no, they don't use leeches. And in 1833, the Krakow brothers, they were French, and they came from Great Britain. How they did that, I'm not sure. But they came to New York, and they set up a real clinic. I mean, these guys were entrepreneurs, very competitive in what they were doing. They were putting amalgam fillings on. You got to remember back then that, barbers were letting blood, and one of the reasons that barbers kind of became dentists, because they're the only ones that had a chair that reclined, which was real convenient if you got to extract a tooth. So the barber dentist became the rage. And the first amalgam war started in 1833 when the Krakow brothers introduced mercury fillings into New York. Now, I don't blame these guys, because at the time there wasn't a lot of alternatives. You had gold or you had an extraction. And gold is not an inexpensive product even by today's standards. Now, the price of gold's down, but still, if somebody's going to have amalgam filling, mercury filling, or gold onlay, it's big difference in fees there, so you can understand why a mercury filling would have been pretty popular. So there was a competition between the barber dentists and the dental physicians, and at the time they also knew about Mad Hatter's disease, and I'm sure many of you know the story here, but at the time they used to make felt, they would take was it a mercury nitrate, is it, for making felt, and they would put the wool in these vats and stir it and boil it, and that would make felt. I don't know the exact process, but that's kind of what they do. Well, you're standing over boiling vats of mercury all day. Do you think maybe you might inhale some of that, maybe absorb it? And, Mad Hatters came out of the fact these people went mad. They went crazy from the mercury absorption. So they were very mercury toxic. So at the time, this wasn't unknown. People knew this was happening and knew it was coming from mercury. So what the American Society of Dental Surgeons was organized at the first dental school, the Baltimore College of Dental Surgery, was founded to standardize treatment and give licensed dentists credibility and prohibit the use of mercury fillings. So what they did, they banded together to say, hey, we're not going to use this Mad Hatter material. We're above that. We're going to use something better, which it was at the time. I guess it was gold or extraction. And then there was a group of dentists that said, nah, we're going to use this mercury filling, which was the barber dentists, and they decided they were going to use the mercury and go their separate way. Well, the ASD required a pledge to not use amalgam, or you were out of the club. And the barber dentists who chose to use amalgam split off, and they formed the ADA in 1859. So the ADA was formed by a group of dentists who wanted to use mercury fillings, or amalgam fillings, or silver fillings, what do you want to call it, but it's a mercury filling. And, oops, what was that? Something fell. We still working? Good. And then there was a second amalgam war, and Alfred Stock was a German chemist and pharmacologist and defined mercuryism in 1926 and recognized that mercury silver fillings were a dangerous source of mercury exposure. Actually, what happened, he spilled some mercury in his lab, and actually the Borinsky was working with him, and they did some studies. Stock did some studies with this. He noticed differences in himself after this spill, and he measured the mercury vapor coming out of his breath, which was pretty interesting because back in early 1900s, instrumentation wasn't real great. And then what Borinsky did was measured it coming out of his urine and feces. So this was pretty interesting. These guys noticed that there was a change in how they felt, and they actually documented the progression of what was going on. And this controversy, and they were telling people, don't use this material, don't use mercury, this is what happens. And the controversy lasted until World War II. After World War II broke out in Europe, there was more important things to worry about, and this kind of got swept under the rug. But as you can see now, we're talking about the mid-1800s, early 1900s, and then again around 1890, 1980, something in that neighborhood, the third amalgam war started. And this is a guy named, you all heard of Hal Huggins? You talk about a unique individual. Did anybody listen to him lecture? I mean, my staff and I went out to Colorado Springs several years ago. What a great course. Really enjoyed it. And we went up Pikes Peak, which was a lot of fun, too. But Hal Huggins is a real gift, and he'll be here this weekend. Is that right? Yeah. So, I don't, is he speaking or just? Yeah, okay. But if you get a chance, listen to Hal. He's getting a little bit older, and I don't know how much longer he's going to be active in speaking, but real treasure. He had concerns about mercury and lost his license in Colorado because of his views on mercury fillings and the way he actually removed them. And he's got all kinds of anecdotal reports of people getting better, and it's pretty amazing. But he's somebody to listen to. Matt Hansen, a Swedish neurobiologist, keep going to 1800s, 1982, explained mercury poisoning from dental amalgams. And then the Iaomt was started in 1985 by a group of, Dave, 7 dentists? Dave, was there 7 dentists originally? Excuse me? 7, yeah. And Dave, or Phil, are you a charter member? Okay. Well, Dave back there in the white shirt is old. He's a charter member of this organization, but glad you're here. So the Iaomt was founded with the goal of producing the science to convince dentists to eliminate mercury. Until that time, no one had really quantified the science and presented it. And the controversy continues. What's so exciting about this weekend to me is this is the 60th meeting, the 30th year of doing this, and we've got more people coming this weekend than we've ever had before, which is really, really a great feeling for our Academy members, and particularly Joe, our treasurer. We got to pay for the meetings, the hotel and the food. Okay, what is an amalgam filling? It's 50% mercury, maybe 54, but it's at least half mercury. We know that. Silver, 35%, give or take. Tin, 9%. That's the control expansion, I think. Wasn't that the reason we put tin in mercury fillings? My materials were a long time ago. Copper, about 6%. Interesting thing about copper, the high copper alloys, greatly increases the release of mercury. So, I don't know. Is anybody in here, anybody using mercury fillings or placing them? Excellent. Okay, we're all removing them. That's the problem, biggest problem. I tell my patients, I take the intraoral photos and show them on the big screen and everything. My biggest conversation with them is how they crack teeth. I mean, I don't know if I've ever, I'm sure I've seen a mercury filling that hasn't had a crack in the tooth, but they are responsible for broken teeth. I mean, you put a occlusal in tooth number 19, at some point in a young person's mouth, at some point in their life, if they continue, they're going to wind up with a root canal and a crown on that tooth because of that initial mercury filling. So, I mean, for no other reason than that, there's no reason to use this stuff besides the toxicity of the mercury. So we have better materials. None of us should ever be placing amalgam fillings. Okay, the FDA says when combining many components, the compound should be named based on the largest ingredient. Corn flakes on the box, sugar. Now, it's corn probably. But, with a mercury filling, that's why I call them mercury fillings. I insist on calling them mercury fillings because they're not silver. 50% is mercury, 35% is silver. So, mercury filling. It's a mercury filling, yeah. Benefits of mercury filling. Oh, this will go on for days. We've been using them for 180 years. I said 200 earlier. I guess that's a real benefit that we've been doing something for 200 years. They're inexpensive, that's for sure. Although getting more expensive as the price of silver goes up a bit. I was talking to my supply guy a couple weeks ago about this. I said, do you still sell dispersal oil? He says, oh, yeah, we sell it. I said, what's the price of that? He said, well, over the last several years, it has doubled or even maybe tripled. I don't know, but I have not a clue what, one of those spills cost. Or what are those capsules? Relatively easy to use. Come on, man. You drill a hole in a tooth, put some, is it Copalite? And then you pack it in there and take the band off and then carve it. I mean, compare that to a well-done composite filling. Much different procedure. And you get paid for it differently, too, because it is a different procedure. I remember years ago with composites, everybody was complaining about sensitivity. Oh, God, they were sensitive. I mean, does anybody have sensitivity issues with composites anymore? I mean, if you do, you need to change your technique. I mean, you're probably getting the tooth too dry or something, but, composites are just so much easier than they used to be, but at the same time, more difficult than mercury. And they resist chewing forces. They sure do. They're hard and harder than the tooth structure, so they will. I mean, many times you see the tooth worn down, occlusal surface, and amalgam filling sticking up out of it. So they're definitely tough. Now we know this is just some chemistry on mercury, not too difficult. Heavy metal, atomic number is 80, and the atomic weight is 200. It's the only metal that's liquid at room temperature. Gas is vaporized, colorless, odorless, tasteless. How many of us have played with mercury as kids? I mean, yeah. I mean, it sounds so much fun. You break a thermometer and have it go all across the basement floor and run around, step in it, and watch it go everywhere. That's probably where I got a lot of it. My dad used to own a gas station when I was a kid, too, so I pumped a lot of gas and washed parts in leaded gasoline. And when I first went in for chelation, my lead was very high. So that's something else that goes. Maybe it was coming from the fluoridated water, too. I don't know. Vaporizes very easily above 10 degrees Fahrenheit and doubles for every 50 degrees. Double the vaporization pressure doubles. Very reactive, oxidizes extremely easily, and passes. Elemental mercury passes right through the lipid layer of the cell. I mean, very, very easily gets into the cell. Once it gets in there, it loses an electron or two, and then very difficult to get out. So it won't go back out. It stays in. The forms of mercury, elemental mercury is either liquid or vapor. 80% of that uptake is in the lungs, crosses the blood-brain barrier, moderate uptake in the intestines. That's not what we're worried about. I said a couple times, and some of my colleagues corrected me, but I still say that, a patient swallows the chunk of the amalgam you're removing, that's not really a big deal because the uptake is not that big in the gut and it'll pass through. What we're concerned about primarily is the mercury vapor coming off that filling when you're taking it out. You, your assistant, and the patient, you're in a cloud. You saw a little bit of that earlier, and Joe will speak to that this afternoon. You're in a cloud of mercury vapor, or this morning I should say. You're really in a cloud of mercury vapor. And remember, it's odorless, colorless, and tasteless, so you don't see it, you don't smell it, you can't tell it's there. It can be measured, and we did that. Okay, mercury is mercurous, which just loses a electron, or it's mercuric if it loses 2 electrons, called oxidation. Inorganic mercury has salt formed by oxidation of mercury. Poor uptake in the intestines, poor mobility, does not cross the blood-brain barrier, and causes inflammation in the gut. Okay, we know that if you're antibiotic resistant, you probably also have a lot of mercury in your gut. People with fibromyalgia probably have a lot of mercury in their gut. So these are things you got to look at and think about, and probiotics are helpful, different ways of getting it out. Chris Shade's got some products. Chris going to be here this weekend? Yeah. If you get a chance, listen to Chris Shade. Excellent products on getting the mercury out of people's guts. And they're kind of antioxidants, so it's not hard for dentists to prescribe them and or sell them. But check with your board. Chemical forms of mercury. You got methylmercury formed by bacteria synthesis in the mouth and gut. 95% uptake in the intestines. Good mobility across the blood-brain barrier. Also, methylmercury is also formed on the slime of sides of fish. So this is something that happens in the body, and you eat it and drink it, and it is absorbed into the body. Ethyl mercury is thimerosal. That's also in our vaccines. A lot of stuff's been reduced. The flu vaccine, I understand, still has mercury. I think child vaccines now has largely been eliminated, but that's the form that's extremely toxic and really easily absorbed. Selenium has the strongest affinity for mercury, even over sulfur. If mercury binds to selenium before it enters the body, it will be less toxic. If mercury binds to selenium after it enters the body, it will be more difficult to remove. And one of the reasons that we talk about eating fish, fish like tuna and mackerel and swordfish, wahoo, some of them have a great deal of mercury, and tuna, I haven't mentioned tuna, I know, but they have a lot of mercury. But the mercury is often bound with selenium. That's why it doesn't bother the fish, but it's in the meat. But it's not the absorption of food, and you'll learn later on, that's really the problem with mercury. It's mercury fillings. That's where we're getting 90% of our mercury, or maybe better than that. So, if you eat an occasional tuna or swordfish or something, fine, enjoy it, because the mercury in that is not where we're getting our mercury uptake. Now, I understand albacore tuna is very high in mercury too, but I don't know anybody. Yes? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Because it's bound to the selenium, if it's in the cell. I'm not understanding the question. Are you saying that I don't know. The answer, I don't know. Phil, you guys can address that? Could you hear the question? Is it bad to give selenium? As a chelation agent. I haven't heard anybody giving selenium as a chelating agent. Is that what you're asking? No?
No, if somewhere in with selenium, does that get it into the cell and make it more difficult to remove?
If you're taking selenium. Correct. Well, my understanding is if it's bound to the selenium, it won't enter the cell, but mercury will enter the cell before it's oxidized. Phil, you guys, Phil?
Yeah, I just have a comment about it. The ADA says a lot of times that, about the fish issue, and we give the warnings for the fish. But the one question I've never gotten the answer from the ADA is,
Yeah, but that's not answering your question on selenium. Well, let's see if we can get together on that and get you an answer, because I want to make sure I understand the question, and then we'll find somebody that knows. Selenium is an antioxidant which binds oxygen and protects against free radical damage from certain chemicals that can cause cancer. Fish are high in selenium. Mercury binds the selenium, which provides protection to the fish and makes the selenium-bound mercury harder for humans to absorb. Mercury in fish has already reacted with proteins and other protective molecules. The mercury bound to selenium is not as toxic as an equal amount of pure equivalent. Fish bind mercury to selenium, which is a stronger bond than the sulfhydryl or thiol groups, from mercury toxicity. Okay? Mercury, it forms covalent bonds with sulfur. More than 99% of enzymes contain sulfur groups that mercury has a strong affinity for. Mercury will bind to sulfur groups and disrupt the function of the enzymes. Many of these sulfur-containing groups have detoxification functions, meaning that once mercury binds to that enzyme, the enzyme still, if you had it measured, would still look like you've got plenty of it, but in fact is ineffective. You know, the key and the keyhole no longer fit, and that can act as an antigen. Mercury has affinity for methionine, cysteine, and cysteine. When mercury binds to an enzyme, the enzyme no longer functions. As I said, you still have the enzyme, but it no longer fits in the keyhole, so it's not doing anything. Okay, this is a chart on the toxicity of heavy metals. You know, we got mercury on the top, cadmium second. Look at that, arsenic third. I don't know if y'all heard about Blanche Taylor Moore in North Carolina years ago, who I think she killed 3 husbands with arsenic. That's a brave guy, that third one. But she'd have been more effective with mercury. I mean, you imagine marrying somebody whose first 2 husbands died of arsenic poisoning? It's like, whoa, wait a minute. That's always scarier than Lorena Bobbitt. Well, no, I think Lorena would be scarier, yeah. Thallium, and on the bottom there, lead. Now, I don't know, y'all, I used to paint houses getting through dental school, and I'm old enough to remember lead and paint. And as I mentioned earlier, I also cleaned lots of parts of my dad's station and pumped a lot of leaded gas. And when I go to my physician now for chelation, we still work on lead. I'm still getting EDTA infusions to get the lead out. So it's prevalent. And it's, if you got fluoride water, you're going to have lead in the water too, because it comes with the fluoride. This is by Tom McGuire, who's a great dentist and has worked a hard and long time getting the word out. He'll be here at the meeting. Mercury is the most poisonous, non-radioactive, naturally occurring substance on our planet. Now, this just isn't him saying that. There's science to back this up. And you go into our database, you'll find out. There is no safe or harmless level of mercury. Just 1 atom of mercury is harmful to the body. Amalgam fillings continually release poisonous mercury vapor. The ADA recognizes and admits that. And we'll show a demonstration here later and some other graphs. But as long as you have a mercury filling in your mouth, it's going to off-gas mercury vapor, which you either inhale and absorb, or you exhale and your kids and family get to absorb it. So it's a really nice actor. Any form of stimulation that heats an amalgam filling will increase the release of mercury vapor. Coffee, food, grinding, brushing, chewing, all that warms an amalgam filling and helps release mercury gas. Some more from Tom. Mercury fillings are the single greatest source of mercury exposure, which we'll show you later. The World Health Organization agrees to that. The first exposure to mercury from mercury fillings can occur at the moment of conception. As I said, passes a blood-brain barrier, goes to the placenta. In fact, cord blood has more mercury in it than the mother does. So it seems to be concentrated in the fetus. So if you've got it in your body, if you've got it in your mouth, the baby's going to have it. We'll show you some interesting things later, too, with some sheep studies with pregnant sheep that were sacrificed and measured. Mercury passes through the placenta to the fetus and through breast milk to the nursing baby. And this is important for assistance. You know, you guys are maybe not having any mercury fillings, but you're breathing this stuff in all the time. If you got your mercury levels checked, you'd probably be scared. I know I was. I know Joe was. He'll talk about that later. Chronic mercury poisoning can directly and indirectly contribute to and increase the risk and severity of every known disease and health issue. Works synergistically to make you sicker. Okay, this is a little chart to kind of give you a comparison. Excuse me. Okay, 1 ounce is 28 grams. Okay, 1 gram is 100 milligrams. 1 milligram is 1,000 micrograms. Now, atoms of mercury in a microgram, the atoms of mercury in a microgram is 4 trillion. Okay? Now, that's not a very big, very large piece of mercury. You know, we're talking tiny, tiny, tiny amount of mercury, but it's got 4 trillion atoms. Every one of those atoms can bind on to an enzyme and make it dysfunctional, make it not work. So think about that. You know, we're talking, you don't have to have a tablespoon of mercury to be effective. We're talking very minute amounts. And we're off-gassing every day with even 4 fillings in your mouth more than OSHA allows. Okay, this is a photomicrograph of mercury filling. And what you're seeing is the globulates there, the little circles with the little circles in them, that's unmixed amalgam. You know, you got to think about amalgam filling is no ionic bonds going on. There's no covalent bonds. It's an emulsion. It's a solid emulsion of metals mixed. And you never get it completely mixed. It's always got some unmixed mercury in it. Even if it was completely mixed, you'd still have off-gassing. But what you can see in that top sphere is just about the top surface of that amalgam filling. And as that amalgam wears down, that mercury is released. And that's where the off-gassing comes from. And that goes on as long as that filling's in place, because you can see the ones down below, it's going to take a while to get to. So you've got a good source of mercury for as long as you want it. This is a chart. Now, some of this is a little bit dated, but still doesn't make it inaccurate. And the difference in this graph is, number one, the difference in calibration and the difference in the amount of mercury fillings that people had in their mouth and the duration of the chewing. So this is unstimulated and measured. Now, again, this is like 1979, 1985 type stuff. But what you're looking at there, the blue graph represents measured mercury vapor coming off people with mercury fillings without ever chewing. Okay, now again, we don't know how many mercury fillings. We don't know right now what the calibration instruments were. But the difference is what's important here. The green measures people without amalgams. Okay, now here's some stimulated chewing. And this is mercury release. And you can see, just the numbers aren't as important as the bar graph is, okay? And with 15 minutes of chewing, Gay measured, 13.1, Abraham 6.3, and Patterson 1.3. Now, again, the green is people who didn't have any mercury, and how much mercury vapor came out of their mouth, probably from the fish they ate or whatever. But, you probably can't get around having some mercury in your body from the environmental aspects of it. But a big difference, and if you go back, let me go one forward here. Okay, estimated unstimulated mercury release per day. Now this was measured, at the time after the 15 minutes or 3 minutes of chewing. But this is what you'd have over a 24-hour period using the numbers before, and you can see pretty significant amount of mercury coming out. Okay, estimated stimulated chewing mercury release per day. Let's go back to that one. Oh, I'm sorry, this was unstimulated, the 30. But look at the difference, 226 with chewing and 30 without chewing. So as you're chewing, greatly increases the mercury release. Now this is a chart that shows what happens with people with mercury fillings. This was done to show after 30 minutes how high the mercury got, chewing gum, let's say, and then how long it took to get the mercury back down. Now you can see after an hour, the mercury was still high coming off the mercury filling. This is being measured in the mouth with a mercury measuring device. So you can see that chart shows you that once you stimulate this mercury filling, it can continually off gases and quite high. High copper alloys, amalgams, have increased mercury release. We know that. PhD presents data showing a single spill high copper amalgam filling releases roughly 300 micrograms initially after placement and almost 800 micrograms of mercury in the first week. This is a high copper amalgam I mentioned earlier. This is several 100% more mercury than what non-high copper amalgams are released during the first few days of placements. 102 micrograms per day on one of the low copper alloys. Not encouraging you to use low copper alloy, but just the difference in the high copper and low copper. These are all sourced, so if you guys want, you've got these in your book. Okay, exceeding the maximum allowable levels, and by how much? Okay, and what we've got here, OSHA on the left, you can see OSHA allowable mercury micrograms is 50. The EPA is 0.3. These guys ought to get their act together. That's quite a difference. But even if you want to go by OSHA standards, 6 mercury fillings gives you twice the allowable OSHA amount per day. Now, if you go open a mixed amalgam capsule, after you've titurated it, open it up, you've got 20 times the OSHA standards, 3,300 times EPA allowable limits. Now, as I said earlier, we're the only industry that nobody cares about mercury pollution. I mean, the EPA and OSHA don't seem to care about our staff and our health and our environment. And it's nuts, but that's the case. I don't know why in the world we get out of being scrutinized by these people. I mean, they hammer everybody else. I remember when I was painting houses back in the 70s, getting through school, the OSHA came out with a rule that, I don't know if you know what a D-rung ladder is, but it used to be extension ladders, had round things you stood on. Well, when that weld would break loose someday, that little spindle you're standing on would turn, and boom, down you went. So they made us all buy ladders that have D rungs, so flat on the top and round on the bottom. So if the weld breaks loose, the thing can't spin. We had a fit over that. My goodness, how can you make us buy new ladders? Well, they regulated painters, but they're not regulating dentists. This is kind of crazy. And then drilling a mercury filling out, there's 80 times the OSHA over the limit and 13,000 by EPA standards. So it's pretty significant by federal agencies that are monitoring our health and our environment. World Health Organization in 1991, dental amalgam is the greatest source of mercury burden in non-occupationally exposed population. The daily exposure from amalgam, according to WHO, is between 3 and 17 micrograms, with 10 being the average mercury vapor exposure per day from amalgam. So 10 micrograms is important. Health Canada reported in 1996 maximum tolerable daily intake of mercury would be released with 4 average size mercury fillings. That's 8 surfaces for a 154-pound adult. So I guess that gives me 16 surfaces and I'd be fine. Based on industrial safety levels. Mark Richardson did some of this work, who was in that film you saw earlier. Sources of mercury. This is something we touched on earlier. Look at this. You can see fish. I'm sorry I don't have a pointer. Well, maybe this is a pointer. Hey, look at that. That third button. I've got this tape touched down. Okay, here's amalgams. You can see here's fish. Not insignificant, but compared to that, okay. And let's see, that says non-fish foods. I guess that's everything but fish. And then you've got air. And then finally over here you've got water. So, we're not saying, it's not consideration for fish, but, if you ate it every day, it sure would be. But I think occasional fish would be all right. Not perfect, but better than having amalgam fillings in your mouth. And this is by the World Health Organization, okay? We didn't make this up. Mercury absorption in humans, okay? Ingested metallic mercury, as we said earlier, if you swallow a chunk of that mercury filling, probably not a big deal. Not ideal, but not a big deal. Ingested inorganic, about less than 25% absorption. Inhaled vapor, that means, as you're removing that mercury or as you're chewing, 80% of that mercury gets absorbed. 80% is a pretty good number. And ingested methyl mercury, like we're talking about the thimerosal, or thimerosal, I say it two different ways, that's 95 to 100% absorption. So it's not hard for mercury to get into your body because it's so easily absorbed. Mark Richardson, again, he's done a lot of work for us, really bright PhD from Canada. It was determined that some 67.2 million Americans, 67.2 million Americans would exceed the mercury dose associated with the reference dose of 0.3 micrograms per cubic meter, established by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in 1995. Now, 1995 is a long time ago. And what they're saying is 67, let's call it 70 million of us exceed the EPA level just because of our fillings. 2010 did a cumulative risk assessment. Concurrent exposure to lead, methylmercury, and mercury, elemental mercury, does occur in the U.S. population. A large proportion, 1/3 of the U.S. population, is concurrently exposed to mercury, methylmercury, and lead on a daily basis. Now, the lead coming from our water, as I said earlier, and I think David will talk more about that this afternoon, if you've got fluoride in your water, you've also got arsenic and you've also got lead that come with it. And mercury and lead are a bad combination. They're very synergistic. So 1/3 of us are routinely exposed, which I think is kind of low, actually. Mercury toxicity, both the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and National Academy of Science state that between 8 and 10% of American women have mercury levels that would render any child they give birth to neurological disorders. Now, that's 8 to 10% of women, pregnant women, are going to have fetuses, children, with some sort of neurological disorder. And we don't have to talk about autism and ADD. It seems like rampant. I'll speak to it a little bit longer, but later about the autism connection. And it's been disputed. I think the American Medical Association came out and said there's not a connection. It's awfully suspicious, and it may not just be mercury. It may be mercury and fluoride and lead and everything we've got going on. I mean, I don't know why the particular reason, but just because you can't pinpoint, like say, autism to mercury doesn't mean there is not a connection. Carl Sagan spoke to that a little bit earlier. Based on this prevalence of the overall U.S. population of women of reproductive age and the number of U.S. births each year, it is estimated that more than 300,000 newborns each year may have increased risk of learning disabilities associated with an in utero exposure to methylmercury. Okay? And how many vaccines does a newborn get? Something like 22 vaccines in the first 2 years of life. Now, again, I understand the vaccine, or the mercury has been taken out of the vaccines today for children. That's my understanding, but it has been in there for a long time. Directions for use. And this comes with a dispersaloid package. And you can see that kind of old writing because we haven't opened up the dispersaloid package in quite a while. Contradictions to mercury use here. In expectant mothers, in children 6 and under, in proximal occlusal contact to the similar metal restorations. How many times do you see a gold crown with a mercury filling right next to it? How many times have you taken off even a PFM crown and it got mercury underneath of it? I mean, it's all the time. People come into us, and if you see a amalgam tattoo, good chance there's mercury underneath that crown. That's where it's coming from. But the similar metal, the galvanic reaction is pulling that mercury out of that filling, and the patient's absorbing it. Not only through the dental tubules, but also into the gum tissue. So, I mean, we were taught in dental school, and again, I'm an old guy. This is 1979. You don't put mercury, you don't lay them underneath crowns. But I'm seeing it all the time. I'm sure you do too, or up against the crown. But you also have the problem with you got a PMF crown over here, and you got a gold crown here, and then you got another PFM over here, and they're all dissimilar metals. I mean, maybe all 3 different labs. So even with 2 different porcelain fused to metal crowns, you can have galvanic reaction. Patients with severe renal deficiency, patients with known allergies to amalgam, which is a lot higher. This is actually allergies to mercury, a lot higher than you suspect. I've heard it as high as 7 to 8% of the population is allergic to mercury. For retrograde endodontic filling, I mean, We don't do apicos anymore in the office. That tooth comes out and an implant goes in. But, apicos all the time being plugged with mercury filling. That's how you recognize them on the Panorex. You see this big old blob of mercury at the apex. Or as a filling material for cast crowns, like I said, underneath the crown. Or somebody's patched the margin of a gold crown where it's decayed with mercury. And this is some examples. You see this all the time. Then you got a mercury filling that's, kind of, here's the crown. Looks like some gold there. I can't see this as well as you guys, but there's an endodontic opening, access opening filled with mercury and a gold crown. Examples of stuff you see all the time. This came from Joe's office. See, these are really nice slides. Some of his more recent work. He's not in here. It's on the tape, though. Now I went to Indiana. Did you get to meet Ralph Phillips? Okay. Well, he was our dental materials lecturer. And the guy was a brilliant guy, and he was a world legend in dental materials. But we used to get this guy right after lunch, and you get in the lecture hall and the lights go out, and Ralph would go, and you can never put a amalgam filling in a gold crown. And I'd be like, oh my God. Dental materials are the worst course we ever... tooth morphology probably was the worst tooth course I ever took in my life. But now statistics. I think statistics was the worst one. But at any rate, that Ralph would go on, and I don't know half of what he said. I was asleep. Anyway, according to him, I can read this now. According to Skinner and Phillips, the insertion of mercury restorations directly in contact with a gold crown would be contraindicated. All right. Mercury in tooth roots and in jaw bones, 4-fold increase in the amount of mercury per gram of tissue weight of dentin when a gold crown was placed over a mercury filling. That's kind of what's talking about the mercury tattoos. You put a metal cap over top of mercury filling, you're going to have mercury released. It's not sealed in there. Currents in the oral cavity, galvanism. We all know about galvanism. We were taught that. It's microamps. The brain operates on nanoamps. Very, very minute electrical patterns. Mercury fillings produce 1,000 times more amperage than the amperage required by the brain. And they're not far away, If it was in your foot, it might make a difference. But I don't know if you all remember, but there's been lots of reports. I've had people come in and tell me that they can hear radio. They can, if they're their teeth, they're going, I'll talk about this later. What? Get out of here. Well, there was a Johnny Carson episode with Lucille Ball on it. When she came in and she sat on Johnny Carson's show, and we ought to get that tape and put this in here, Joe. I'm sure it's available. Well, she talked about hearing radio in her head. And Johnny, how he would take this. He obviously made a joke out of it. But the truth is, some of these folks do pick up radio waves due to the galvanic interaction with these different metals. So when somebody comes in and tells you that, they're not nuts. It's for real. And they could be nuts, but probably not. But it's probably for real. Because we know about galvanism. Mercury material safety data sheet, okay. Chronic long-term exposure, inhalation of mercury vapors cause mercurialism. We know that. Okay? Findings are extremely variable and include tremors. I mean, you can, if you get in, there's pages and pages and pages and pages of what mercury cause. And if you've ever taken pathology, you have every disease ever listed when you're taking that course because you've got symptoms from all of it. But you got salivation, stomatitis, you got loosening of teeth, blue gums, tattoos, pain and numbness in the extremities, multiple sclerosis, nephritis, diarrhea, anxiety, headache, weight loss, anorexia, mental depression, insomnia, irritability, instability, hallucinations, and evidence of mental deterioration, Alzheimer's. So, all of these have been reported with mercury. Mercury material safety data sheet, okay? So what about mixed amalgam? There was a legal case in 2006, the Barnes legal case, and it was very interesting because the Sixth Circuit Court declared, based on testimony of Kerr, we all heard of Kerr, dental manufacturer, mixed amalgam and pure mercury are equally hazardous. Therefore, a separate MSDS sheet is not necessary on mercury fillings. So you could have the same MSDS sheet for your bottle of mercury that you used to. You guys ever do that? Splash of this and 2 pellets of that. At any rate, it's the same hazard with the mercury filling as it is with the pure mercury bottle. So that's pretty telling in itself. And Kerr said that. Mercury vapor inhalation inhibits binding of guanosine triphosphate to tubulin in rat brains, similarly to a molecular lesion in Alzheimer's disease brains. Boyd Haley's here. He did that research, but the tubulin is what gives the axons its shape. And once mercury, you'll see on a film here we've got shortly, is introduced, the tubulin breaks down. And then you have these neurofibrillary bundles, these tangles, that are also associated with Alzheimer's. Dental silver tooth filling is a source of mercury exposure revealed by a whole body image scan. We're going to show you that in a little bit by Murray Vinnie. Whole body imaging of the distribution of mercury released from dental fillings into monkey tissue. That's another really interesting study that was done. Excuse me. Okay. Vinnie Murray, this has been some years ago at the University of Calgary. He's a founding member of the Iaomt. Did a full body scan of a sheep. And what he did, he put radioactive isotope of mercury. Okay, he made a radioactive isotope of mercury, which doesn't exist in nature. You don't go out and dig up mercury, cinnabar, and then go, okay, here's radioactive. You got to make that. So what he did, he made a radioactive isotope and then mixed it with the mercury pellets to form radioactive amalgam filling. And then what he did, he put it in the teeth of sheep. I don't know exactly how many he put in there, but I think it was 14 fillings or something, occlusals. And then he waited 29 days, sacrificed the sheep, cut the crowns off the tooth, just left the roots, and did a body scan. Now, what you can see here is that the stomach, oops, I'm sorry, wrong button. Well, one button can really back you up. We got the stomach and the liver. Here's the kidneys, and here's the mouth. You can see the outline of the sheep. And look at the concentration of mercury in the liver and the gut, and in the kidneys particularly. You've got 2 kidneys, and I don't know how many stomachs they have, but there's 3 A's. But at any rate, a lot of mercury sitting there. That was 29 days after the placement of amalgam. Now, what happened is there's another illustration of that. You can see, oops, I'm sorry, I keep pushing that wrong button. Darn it. I'll get better. Okay, now, let's go to the next one. There. Okay, now you get some numbers here. You can look at the kidney. 7,400, 772, 929. That's a lot of mercury in and around this body. So what happened was that he's reported these findings, and the ADA came out and said, well, that's not right. I mean, sheep chew differently than people, so therefore this is fine for sheep, but it doesn't correlate to human beings because they chew different. I guess they're a rudiment. They chew differently than we do for some reason. Okay, fine. So what he did it on a monkey. Now, monkeys are pretty similar to us, I think, as far as their anatomy, and they chew pretty much the same way, although they'll bite your face off. But again, done with jaw, kidneys, intestine, the same thing. What this is showing is that this mercury vapor is being absorbed by our body out of our fillings. I mean, it's pretty blatant. Okay, this is a film done also in Calgary that really shows how mercury introduced to neurons affects them. Demyelinates the nerve fibers and can lead to disease such as multiple sclerosis, ALS, Alzheimer's, mental illness, and depression. There we go. You hear that? Okay.
How mercury causes brain neuron degeneration. Mercury has long been known to be a potent neurotoxic substance, whether it is inhaled or consumed in the diet as a food contaminant. Over the past 15 years, medical research laboratories have established that dental amalgam tooth fillings are a major contributor to mercury body burden. In 1997, a team of research scientists demonstrated that mercury vapor inhalation by animals produced a molecular lesion in brain protein metabolism, which was similar to a lesion seen in 80% of Alzheimer's diseased brains. Recently completed experiments by scientists at the University of Calgary's Faculty of Medicine now reveal, with direct visual evidence from brain neuron tissue cultures, how mercury ions actually alter the cell membrane structure of developing neurons. To better understand mercury's effect on the brain, let us first illustrate what brain neurons look like and how they grow. In this animation, we see 3 brain neurons growing in a tissue culture, each with a central cell body and numerous neurite processes. At the end of each neurite is a growth cone where structural proteins are assembled to form the cell membrane. 2 principal proteins involved in growth cone function are actin, which is responsible for the pulsating motion seen here, and tubulin, a major structural component of the neurite membrane. During normal cell growth, tubulin molecules link together end to end to form microtubules, which surround neurofibrils, another structural protein component of the neuronal axon. Shown here is the neurite of a live neuron isolated from snail brain tissue, displaying linear growth due to growth cone activity. It is important to note that growth cones in all animal species, ranging from snails to humans, have identical structural and behavioral characteristics and use proteins of virtually identical composition. In this experiment, neurons also isolated from snail brain tissue were grown in culture for several days, after which very low concentrations of mercury were added to the culture medium for 20 minutes. Over the next 30 minutes, the neurite membrane underwent rapid degeneration, leaving behind the denuded neurofibrils seen here. In contrast, other heavy metals added at this same concentration, such as aluminum, lead, cadmium, and manganese, did not produce this effect. To understand how mercury causes this degeneration, let us return to our illustration. As mentioned before, tubulin proteins link together during normal cell growth to form the microtubules which support the neurite structure. When mercury ions are introduced into the culture medium, they infiltrate the cell and bind themselves to newly synthesized tubulin molecules. More specifically, the mercury ions attach themselves to the binding site reserved for guanosine triphosphate, or GTP, on the beta subunit of the affected tubulin molecules. Since bound GTP normally provides the energy which allows tubulin molecules to attach to one another, mercury ions bound to these sites prevent tubulin proteins from linking together. Consequently, the neurite's microtubules begin to disassemble into free tubulin molecules, leaving the neurite stripped of its supporting structure. Ultimately, both the developing neurite and its growth cone collapse, and some denuded neurofibrils form aggregates or tangles, as depicted here. Shown here is a neurite growth cone stained specifically for tubulin and actin, before and after mercury exposure. Note that the mercury has caused disintegration of tubulin microtubule structure. These new findings reveal important visual evidence as to how mercury causes neurodegeneration. More importantly, this study provides the first direct evidence that low-level mercury exposure is indeed a precipitating factor that can initiate this neurodegenerative process within the brain.
Isn't that scary? That's pretty wild. All right, everybody still awake? All right, we'll take a break. Do 15 minutes. We got coffee set up. Get up and stretch. Yes, sir. Yeah, we have it on the website.
My headache.